Alrighty, what's up, guys? So today I'm going to show you how to do perfect depth handling with your models, so that way they intersect each other nicely. So as I'm sure you saw, these two right here, they were having some weird depth issues, and yeah, so today I'm going to show you how to fix that. So that way, whenever you say you have these intersecting, or if you had, say, you wanted a wall, I'll move that one there. You want some walls, and that way that they look perfectly like they overlap each other correctly. We're gonna fix that today, and this is always usually the hard part of sprite stacking, is getting that depth handled, and I'm going to show you a really easy way to do it. Super simple and fairly efficient with GameMaker Studio 2.3. So first thing we need to do is we're going to create a parent object. Call this object model, and this is just going to be for anything that's a model. So anything that we're modeling is going to have this object as the parent. I created some folders also just for organizational purposes, a controller, model, and then player folder. Okay, so we're going to also comment out the draw event of the block, because we're not going to be using that. We're going to be using layers instead, and then we're going to offset the layers, so that way it's just a lot more efficient that way. And yeah, you're not going through each of these individual objects and then drawing all the sprites. And then also, because this object is at a certain depth, all these sprites will be drawn at that same depth. So if this is -1, it's closer to the camera, all these sprites are going to be -1. But let's say that you want the bottom one to be, at a depth of 3, and the top of the thing to be at a depth of -1. Well, you can't really do that in one single draw event of an object. But we can create layers that are each of these depth sizes and throw those sprites on each layer. So I'm going to create a new object and call this object depth control, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer called depth control. We'll throw our object in there. I put it under the instances layer. This one doesn't really matter what depth it's at. The outline layer has to be obviously under it, but it doesn't really matter where it's at, because each layer is going to have an individual depth anyway. So first thing we need to do is go into our object depth control, create a global variable that's z layer, and we're going to set it to an array. And then we're also going to create a global.worldHeight variable, and let's just set it to 64 for now. This variable you can change to whatever you want. This is basically the maximum height of the world that we're building. So our block here is 32 pixels high, or 32 sprites high, because it's got 32 sub images. So that's the height of that one. The max height is 64 though, so we can go up to 64. If you wanted like a really tall building, you could change this to 128 or 512, whatever you want. We're just gonna create that many layers, but I'm gonna set it 64. The lower the better, in my experience, as far as if you want good performance and everything. So but yeah, you can set that to whatever you want. Anyway, so we're going to go say for variable I equals 0, I is less than global.worldHeight, I is ++. And then we're going to create these layers. Global.zLayer layer is equal to layer, oh, sorry, it's an array. Global.zLayer I is equal to layer create -I. And then we're just going to call this z layer plus string I plus there we go. So basically we're creating a layer, and we're setting the depth from 0 to our world height, and we're creating a layer for each of those heights. So the maximum negative depth will be -64, and the minimum will be 0. And then this is just a name. It's pretty arbitrary because we're going to be rendering everything within this object. I guess we're going to rename this. Actually, we're going to call this object renderer. There we go. And we'll just change this layer name also to renderer, because this is going to render all of our models basically. All right, with that created, let's comment up here and say create world depth layers. Then we're going to create model sprites on layers here. So we're going to say if instance exists object model. We're going to say with object model, and this is why we needed to parent it, so that everything that's a model will be added to this world, to each of these layers. We're going to set an index variable to an array, and then we're going to run another for loop. Variable I equals 0, I is less than image number, I is plus plus. And then we're going to say index I equals layer sprite create global.z layer I x y sprite index. So basically what we're doing is we're going through each of these models. We're going to create a sprite, which we're referencing as index, and that sprite is going to be put on each of these layers. So the first sub image will be on layer 0, the second one be on layer 2, which is set to negative I, etc., or negative 1, etc., etc. So now that we've got our sprites set on each of these layers, up to, because the image number is 32, up to 32 layers, we need to set the parameters, I guess, of the sprite. So we'll say layer sprite speed index I, we'll set that to 0. Layer sprite index I, we'll set to I. And that's basically the same thing that we were doing with this right here, setting the sub image to I. So then, yeah, that's what we're doing there, setting the sprite speed to 0. We're also going to say layer sprite x scale, index I, image x scale, layer sprite y scale, index I, image y scale, and then layer sprite angle, index I, image angle. So this will make sure that our sprite is orientated correctly, so we can come in here and we can rotate these around, resize them however we want. Let's even create a little rotated wall here. There we go. And we'll put it we'll just put it coming out somewhere. We'll just run it through. That way you can actually see how the depth handling is correctly working. So yeah, we're just initially setting up our sprite, setting the index, and yeah, generating it onto our layers. Next thing we need to do, create a step event, and we're going to say update layer position. So in the object block here, we had the camera angle. We were calculating the camera angle, and then we were adjusting the sprites X and Y to that camera angle, so that way we got the correct rotation look. Well, instead of doing that per sprite, per object, we're actually just going to move the layers instead. So, but the same principles still apply. So we'll say for variable I equals 0, I is less than global.world height, I is plus plus. Then we'll say var camdir equals negative camera get view angle, view camera 0 plus 90. This is all we had in the block object. So ldx length dir x, the I camdir, var ldy length dir y I camdir, and then we're just going to update the layer x and y position. So layer x global.z layer I is ldx, and then layer y global.z layer I is ldy. Perfect. So now instead of doing that per block, per draw of it, we're just every step of it updating just our layer x and y rotational position, because some of these length dir controls can get kind of CPU heavy, so it's good if the minimum calls you can do, instead of doing it per object per step, just do one per step per layer. So the next thing we need to do is update our sprite parameters. So we'll say if instance, actually we'll go ahead and let's just go into our create event. We'll just copy all this. And we'll just need to get rid of a couple things. So first thing we need to get rid of is get rid of the index. We're not going to reset the index, and we also do not need to recreate a new sprite. We've already got the index created, and we've already got the sprite. And this is basically just going to update the speed, the index, the x scale, y scale, angle, and we also want to update sprite x. We'll say index I, image, or sorry, not, I don't know. X is what I meant to put. Layer sprite Y, index I, Y. And so that way, if you want any of your models to move, rotate, rescale, etc., this will update each of the models. And that should be it. We've got our room. We got some stuff set up here. So that looks funky. And let's. I'm gonna move some more of these around, just so that way we've got some cool variety here. So, you know, these could be like buildings and walls and whatnot. Alrighty. And if I've got everything set up correctly, yep, got the block, object model, then let's run it and see how she looks. Alrighty. As you can see, our outlines are messed up, but the actual models themselves perfectly intersect. Actually, I'm going to go back in here and let's fix the models real quick, or the outlines real quick. So the reason the outline is not drawing correctly is because we have 1 plus width, 1 plus height, and no rotation. So we actually want to say image x scale plus width, image y scale plus width, and then image angle. This should fix it. I sure hope so. So let's run it again. That should fix our outline layer there. So yes, there we go. All right, now as you can see, everything perfectly intersects, and you've got the outlines that are also drawing perfectly underneath everything. And yeah, so perfect depth handling. These can move around, stretch, whatever, and you'll always have the correct depth. It'll always be that things from your position, from where you're looking, are behind walls or in front of them, depending. So yeah, that's the basics of it. That's how you create and or that's how you get perfect depth handling. With the sprite stacks and then also fixing the outline there, so that way it looks pretty good and it works. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys find this useful, and until next time, bye guys.